have you ever considered how much God is watching you? You ever thought about that? How much is God watching you? How much is God watching over you? How much does he care about what happens to you? You ever really stop to consider that? In Luke chapter 12, come with me there if you will, please. We're going to only just go there for just a moment, and then we're going to jump to Exodus. But in Luke chapter 12, it's Jesus talking in verse 6. And he says, "Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 farthings, and not one of them is forgotten before God? But even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear not, therefore, ye are of more value than many sparrows." God has a value for you. Why does God value you? Talk to me. Why does God value you? Deborah.
He created us for his pleasure.
Created us for his pleasure. Okay? He created the sparrows too for his pleasure. But we are more valuable than the sparrows. Why does God value you? Martina.
He loves us.
Because he loves us. Okay. Another question. Why does he love you? Let's dig a little deeper. Why does he love you? Hey, Tyler, why does God love you?
Because he didn't want to be on his son.
Well, he did. That shows kind of how much he loves you. But why does God love us? You know, I got to thinking, jumping ahead a little bit, I realized that I was a day ahead in my Bible reading, and that frequently happens when I hit the story of Joseph. I just kind of motor right on through. I got to get to that part where he shows, "I'm your brother Joseph." I just can't wait until I get to that part, you know, like, and then just to see the look on the brothers' faces, like, uh-oh. We could all lose our heads here in a minute, but you know, but then he's weeping and crying and all that stuff. But anyway, found myself a day ahead, but I was thinking of Moses. You think about Moses and all the circumstances around Moses, how obvious was God's hand on Moses. Now, just going to look briefly at a few things, and I think I skipped over a page here. Yeah, I'm on the wrong page because I'm on my Bible reading page, my marker. I have a little marker here for my Bible reading page, and I'm not quite there yet. But I want to just think to start with of Israel itself. Just to set the tone before we get to Moses, we think of Israel, and after Joseph, we have all Joseph's family died, and everybody that knew Joseph died, and then there was a king that came on after that, a pharaoh that came on after that, and didn't know who Joseph was, and they got worried about the Israelites. Why did they worry about the Israelites? Deborah.
They were increasing so much, and they thought if there was war, that they might fight with the enemy.
Exactly. They kept increasing, and God kept blessing them, and they kept growing and growing and growing, and so they take a look in Exodus chapter 1. All right? Exodus chapter 1. See here that it says, verse number 7, it says, "And the children of Israel were fruitful, and increased abundantly, and multiplied, and waxed exceeding mighty, and the land was filled with them." What does that tell you? There's a lot of them. Wherever you look, there's another Jew, all right? And God blessed them and multiplied them, and they got worried. Like I said, like Deborah said, they got worried that if war broke out, there's more of them than there is of us. And if war breaks out and they decide to side with the other army, we're in trouble, just like Deborah said, all right? So we're going to stop that. We are going to afflict them. We're going to make them do harder work. And here's our plan. We're going to slow them right down. Verse 12. "But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew." So much for plan A. All right? They thought, well, we'll oppress these people and we'll stop them from getting more and more, and it backfired. They continued to grow more and more and more. So they decided to have government health care. They did. Government health care. They're going to hire 2 midwives. What are the midwives' names? Do you remember? What's that? Pua and Shifra, okay? And so they give the government health care steps in, these midwives. All right, if it's a girl, you let her live. If it's a boy, you kill him, okay? What did they do? What did they do? Look at verse 17. It says, here's the problem. But the midwives feared God. That's what we ought to do. We ought to fear God. And it says, but the midwives feared God and did not as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men children alive. And they asked us, why did you do that? And they look at verse 19. It says, and the midwives said unto Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively and they are delivered ere the midwives come in unto them. But the Hebrew women, they're a lot tougher than your Egyptian women are, okay? And they have these babies before we get there. But at any rate, God blessed Shifra and Pua. Look at verse 12, it says, or 21 rather. And it came to pass, because the midwives feared God, that he made them houses, all right? So now that didn't work. That was basically plan B, all right? So plan C was, we're just going to make it a law. We're just going to make a law that if you have a male child, you must throw him in the river, verse 22. And Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, every son that is born ye shall cast him into the river, and every daughter ye shall save alive. Okay, so there's the situation with Israel. Along comes a young couple named Amram and Jochebed. All right, and they have, and now I want you to see how God is stepping in here. Okay, for Moses, because Moses is born. Apparently, this is after Aaron. Aaron is 3 years older than Moses, so it's after Aaron, and Miriam is even older than that. I can't remember. I think it tells us where she is. I'm thinking she's like 10, but I can't remember where I get that number from. All right, but at any rate, she is older than Aaron is. Okay, and they have this child. Now here, I want you to see where God has stepped in. All right, verse 2 of chapter 2. And the woman conceived and bare a son, and when she saw him, that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. Does anybody know what that means when he was a goodly child? He was a very, this is the Gerber baby, okay? They had years ago, how many of you remember when they had a contest to see who's going to be the Gerber baby, and you take photos of your kid and put them in, and I got news for you, all right? All babies are not cute. Some of them are just nice outfit. Okay, you don't quite know what to say, but at any rate, you can't lie. But oh, that's a really nice outfit you have on him. I mean her. Okay, but at any rate, he was a very goodly child, and that comes into play. That comes into play. Just the fact that he made him a very cute little baby comes into play because they hid him for 3 months. Figured they can't hide him any longer than this because babies cry. So we all know what happened with, they made a little ark out of bulrushes and slimed it in and out with pitch, and they put it in the river and waited to see, and Miriam was there to wait and see, and obviously she is not less than 3 years old. She's older than Aaron. That's why I think she's around 10, but I get that number from somewhere. It may have been out of a hat, all right? But at any rate, she's older than he is, okay? Old enough to carry on this next little part. And we see here that as she put him into the ark, she set it by the river's bank, and his sister, verse 4, says, stood afar off, to wit, what would be done with it to him, just watching. And here's another place where God steps in. I want you to see this, all right? Verse 5, and the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along the riverside, and when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him, and said, this is one of the Hebrews' children. She had compassion on this little child. For a couple of reasons, all right? One, he's as cute as a button, all right? He is, all right? But number two, what would have happened if it would have been one of Pharaoh's soldiers that found this little Hebrew boy in the river? He probably would have drowned him. Not it. Him. Probably would have drowned him, all right? Especially since now he's making points with Pharaoh, because this is what Pharaoh's, if it was somebody that's trying to, impress and work his way up, yeah, he's going to get points for killing this Hebrew baby, all right? But women are naturally more compassionate, naturally more emotional than men are. It's just the way we're wired, okay? Men are more logic-based and goal-driven, and women are different. And I know society says, no, we're all the same, it doesn't matter, but that's not the case, all right? We're different. So it was this lady found him, this cute little baby, and because of who she is, she has compassion on this little baby. And there's no indication here that Jochebed said, how would she even know? If the princess finds her, you go up and you ask I think this was just Miriam, this little girl. Hey, do you want me to find a nurse for this little baby? All right. And she was there to watch what was going to happen, but this whole plan, there's no way anybody could have thought that this plan was going to work like this and she could do this. You're dreaming, all right? So God has this little girl step in, and what happens? We have our first recorded paid daycare, all right? That happens right here, where she's actually paid to take care of Moses, all right? Now, I want you to see something here. How long, you're looking for let me see if I can find the verse here. Did I put the verse? I didn't put the verse down. And the daughter, no. Verse 7. Then said his sister, Miriam, to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you? Here's my question. How long did she nurse the child for? Deborah, have a thought?
Until it was weaned, right?
Until he was weaned, correct. How long was that? Maybe two? I'm going to tell you, they did not have the Gerber baby food back then, okay? They didn't have all that kind of stuff. They nursed their children longer back then. Let me give you an instance, all right? And think about this instance. We have another promise made. Once my child is weaned, I will give him to the Lord. Who made that promise? Martina? Hannah. Do you think she took a little 1.5 to 2-year-old child and gave him to the priest to mind? No, he would have been older than that. Probably at minimum 3, okay? That's but possibly even 4 years old before she would have taken him. Now, Hannah, in all fairness, it would have been a little bit later than, wasn't as soon as he was weaned, because they would travel there once a year for the sacrifices. So it's possible, halfway through the year, the child is weaned, and another 6 months could have transpired before she actually took him, because that was the time that they would go for the sacrifice. We see, and we're not going to look at the verses, but in 1 Samuel 1, verse 21 and 22, it says, that he was going to take her to the sacrifice, and she says, no, I'm not going until my child is weaned, all right? And then she does take him there. So the child was I'm guessing Moses was pushing 4 years old by the time that he actually was given to her, okay, given to Pharaoh's daughter. Now, here's some interesting facts I want you to see here, okay? At 2 years old, how large is a child's brain? At 2. Compared to an adult's brain, how big do you think it is at 2 years old? Come on, give me a guess. It's free guesses. Percentage-wise, how big do you think it is? Sean? 55%. 55%. You're not even close. Just to tell you. Think about this. When you have a little child that is 2 years old and they put their hands up over their head, can they do this? They can barely touch their hands together because their head is so much bigger than the rest of their bodies compared to us, all right? A child at 2 years old, their brain is 80% the size of an adult's. Isn't that amazing? 80% the size, okay? If intelligence was measured by the ability to learn, okay, to be able to pick things up, if that's how we measured intelligence, do you know who the smartest people on the planet would be? People that are between the ages of 2 and 7. They have a better ability to learn than any other time. Okay? I had this one statistic before, and I was trying to find it and look for it. So I could be a little bit off on my number. All right? I probably most definitely am a little bit off on my number, but let me show you this. By the time a child is 5 years old, they all have already learned about 80 to 85% of everything they're ever going to learn. You just think of all the things that you learn as a child, being able to know what things are, to be able to speak things, to be able to control your body, to be able to do all these different things. And we fine-tune those things. You know, like an athlete learns how to run, okay? He already knows how to run at 5 years old. It's just a matter of tuning it, just a little bit extra stuff there. Here's my point. Here's my point. This child, probably pushing 4 years old, has been with his mom and his dad learning God's ways at when his brain can suck it up the best of any time, to the point where Moses, what he learned, put him into, even as a child, put him into Hebrews 11's Hall of Faith. Hebrews 11:25, choosing rather to suffer the affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. And that's not when he's a child, but these things were already instilled into him, that he knew who he was. And yes, there's lots of other stuff that he did that was wrong, just like we do. He goes out and he kills the guy when he's 40 years old and buries him in the sand, and somehow or other he thinks that nobody's going to know what he did until the next day when another battle went on. But I want to show you something else. After he killed the Egyptian, where did Moses go? Where did he go? Anybody know? He went off to a place called Midian, in the wilderness in Midian. Now, here's what's really cool. Take your Bibles, come with me to Exodus chapter 2 and verse 15. Now, when Pharaoh heard this thing, talking about him killing the Egyptian, he sought to slay Moses, but Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian and sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. And the shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. He goes there and he kind of defends these girls that are shepherds, all right? And they bring the sheep there, and their father is called the priest of Midian. He actually has 5 names or titles in the Bible, if we're going to include Moses' father-in-law, okay? He's Moses' father-in-law, which is found numerous times, and I started to count them out, and I saw there was 10 where it actually says Moses' father-in-law, but then there's a bunch of others that say, like Moses, the father-in-law of Moses, or something like that, but like just the actual Moses' father-in-law, it was like 10 times. He's also called the priest of Midian 3 times. He's called Jethro 9 times. He's called Reuel 1 time. And he's called Hobab 2 times. Okay? Now, you say, what's the significance of that? Well, let me take you to one passage first. I want to show you something here. Okay? Let's come with me to Exodus chapter 18. Exodus chapter 18. We know that Moses marries one of his daughters named Zipporah. He has 2 sons. One's named Gershom. The other one's named Eleazar. And we see here that after he goes and brings the Israelites out of Egypt, his father-in-law comes to see him. Chapter 18, verse 1, it says, when Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, there we got three of his titles all in one verse, heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, his people, and that the Lord had brought them out of Egypt. He'd done that. And some might say, if you were to jump down to verse number 11, after Moses tells him all the things that had happened to them, he says in verse 11, he says, now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods, for in the thing wherein they dealt proudly, he was above them. And some might grab that verse and say, see, he wasn't a godly priest, all right? I don't believe that's the case. And I'm gonna show you, there's really not a lot on him, so some of this is conjecture, but I want you to think of this, all right? Because when they first, flip back with me, if you will, to Exodus chapter 2, all right? And we read verses 15, 16, and 17. It says, verse number 18, so this is after he's helped them water their flock. Verse 18, it says, and when they came to Reuel, their father, he said, how is it that ye are come so soon today? Okay? This is the one instance where Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, the priest of Midian, Hobab, is called Reuel. It's the first time when they come, he's called Reuel. Do you know what the name Reuel means? It's the only time it's called that. But you know what the name Reuel means? Friend of God. That's what the name means. I believe, and again, I can't prove it 100%, but I'm going to tell you, I believe he was a godly priest. A kind of like Melchizedek. Where did Melchizedek come from? Who was Melchizedek? We don't know. There's all kinds of conjecture as to who he was. Was he indeed Shem? I don't know. Was he Jesus in the flesh? I can pretty much guarantee you, I could show you that he was not that, all right? But there's all kinds of theories as to who Melchizedek was. But I believe that Jethro was a godly priest, even in a country that wasn't Israel, all right? We've seen other places in the Bible where we found people that were godly, God-fearing people, all right, that weren't part of the Israelites, because did God only come for the Israelites? No, all right? But they were few and far between. But at any rate, okay, I think that he was a godly priest. And we see here that when we get to that verse that I showed you in Exodus chapter 18 and verse 11, I think it's just more of a confirmation that he's just saying this, all right? That, you know, now I know for a fact that there's no other gods, all right? But you can see through all of these things. So where he goes, he ends up with the priest of Midian. That's where he marries that woman Zipporah. How God keeps going ahead of Moses and just lining these things up. Is he forcing people to do these things? No, he's not. But where he's directing him and the things that it's allowing him, God is watching over Moses from before the time he was even born. All right? And watching and taking care of him. We can see that all through his life. All right? God had planned for him to be the one that was going to intervene and to bring these people out of Egypt. But we see the different people that God used. God used Pharaoh's daughter. He used Pharaoh's daughter to protect. Think of Moses. Of all the other kids that were out there, the parents were trying to hide. They were still in great danger. All right? But Moses had a get out of jail free card. All right? And Amram and Jochebed could walk around and carry him outside, and no soldiers were going to touch him because they knew that this was Pharaoh's daughter's son to be. And they had no idea that Amram and Jochebed were actually his real parents, but they got to raise him in a godly way. We see that God used this little girl who was maybe 10 years old. I don't know how old Miriam was, but he used her to intercede, just in some little idea that she had in her mind, and put this all together as this little girl, and God used that, all right? God used his parents. God used Moses' parents in the few short years that they had with him, although I think, you know, that there may have had been able to have like visiting rights, you know, that type of thing. I don't know. But I do know this. God put Moses there for Amram and Jochebed to teach him for a few years when his mind was a sponge. Unlike what a lot of parents do now and put the sponge and let Sesame Street do all the wringing out and letting the kids suck into their brains here. But when his mind was a sponge, he could learn about Deuteronomy chapter, was it 6, where it tells him whether these things, put them on, nail them on your doorposts and speak of them when you're lying down, when you're sitting down, and all of that stuff. And God used that, all right? God used his father-in-law as well for the next 40 years that he lived in the wilderness with his father-in-law till God spoke to him at the burning bush to take him out. God used them, all right? Luke chapter 12, verse 7. But even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear not, therefore, ye are of more value than many sparrows. God does things because he loves us. He brings people into our lives. He brings circumstances into our lives because he loves us. Now, I've told you the story before of when I went to look for my first job. And my dad told me that this is how I was supposed to do it. You go in there and you tell them, I've never done this job before, but I am a hard worker and I'm willing to learn. That was not me, okay? I was a very timid kid as a young kid. I went to all these other grocery stores where I wanted to get a job. Hi, can I have an application? And I'd fill out the application and everything. And I knew that my dad was going to ask me when I got home, did you say what I told you to say? So I got to this one dumpy grocery store that I didn't want to work at, right downtown, and I thought, okay. My name's Steve, and I've never done this job before, but I'm a hard worker, and I'm willing to learn. How old are you, son? I'll be 16 on Friday. You can start Saturday. And I got the job. But you know what happened by getting that job? I did. 6 months later, this girl with funny embroidery on the back of her pants started working there. And that's where I met her, my wife, Lenore. All right? And God brought that all together because I decided I was going to obey one time, do what my dad told me to say. Otherwise, I'd have got shoved out the door. They didn't need another guy to work. But you know what? God moves things because he cares for us. He cares enough to number all 6 hairs on Brother Wayne's head. It says it right there. All right? What's that? Yes. All right. But you know what? I want you to think when you leave tonight, how often has God intervened in your life? What has God done when you look at just kind of the crazy circumstances that God has used to bless you? You know what? We serve a great God. And he loves us. And he cares for us. More than he cares for his other creation. More than many sparrows. All right? Loves us enough to, as Tyler told us. What'd you tell us, Tyler? How much did God love you? Enough to? To send his only begotten Son. All right, for us. Think about, just spend some time thinking about and thanking God for some of the things that he's done when you look back and you can see how he fit it together and how he took care of somebody like Moses and brought all those little pieces in there to protect this little baby that otherwise would have been fish food in the Nile. All right, let's pray. Precious Father, thank you for your goodness.